Yes, I am Helen Beal, and today I'm going to be talking with you about why VSM is beyond projects, Agile and DevOps, why I think it's the next generation ways of working, and then importantly, how we can help you from the VSMC to assess your current state and why you would want to do that and how it can help you go on your VSM journey. So, many of you probably are familiar with the connection between projects and Agile and DevOps, but I'm just going to recap to get us started, and we'll probably come back to that quite frequently. But of course, there's this movement from project to product, as told as a story in the book From Project to Product by Dr. Mick Kirsten, which is very central around this long-lived product concept that we have in Agile. So that's the link between projects, products, and Agile. And agility is about being product centric. And then DevOps is about taking that agility that we learn in software development, product management, and applying it to IT operations. So all these things are connected, and that connection between these ways of working is really important. I think we've already done a sufficient introduction of myself today, but the hat I'm wearing today is very much my VSM hat, and in particular my Value Stream Management Consortium hat. So we'll be talking about what we do at the consortium. So let me just give you a brief intro for those of you that aren't familiar with our work and who we are. We are a not-for-profit organisation. So we're funded by our members for our members. And the reason we exist is to nurture this emerging market, if you like, around value stream management. So value stream management is unusual in that it can be dated as quite old. So you can perhaps date its provenance back to the 1400s, to the Venetian arsenal. But it has a renaissance that started in around 2018, and that renaissance was very much driven by our work over the last 15 years with DevOps. So there's this relationship that, again, as I said, everything is interconnected, particularly in this ways of working space. So our goals in VSM are not very different from the goals of Agile and DevOps themselves. Our goal is absolutely about customer joy. So it's about getting the things that customers want to them much faster than normal. So it's about speed and it's about value realization. One of the other things that we do at the Value Stream Management Consortium is research. So we've done 3 State of VSM reports. Keep an eye out for the next State of VSM survey. It'll be coming out late this month. And in those reports, we have been monitoring the trends in the marketplace and also trying to understand more about what VSM practices and principles are out there, how they use them, and how they affect these outcomes that we're looking for in terms of how people can do better work and enjoy their work more. You might have noticed that my personal mission is about bringing joy to work. So in the latest report that was shipped in about October last year, we very much focused on this area. So the trends that we'd seen across the 3 years. So I have noticed that we've got a question pop up. So I'm just going to have a quick look at that. I do like to try and answer them when they pop up, because normally they're to do with something that we were just talking about. And if we leave them too long, we lose the context. So Fortune has asked, creating the stream from PO, so product owner, through Scrum team, through DevOps, what's really the best way to get business to understand the business needs to join the stream for optimal organizational flow and a successful switch to the product operating model? See, that looks like quite a small question because it's not so many words, but it's actually a very big question, which is about how to resolve this separation that we have in most organizations between what we call the business. I use quotation marks because it's a bit of a weird term, because when we say it's technologists, what we mean is everybody that's not a technologist in our organization. And then we're talking about our technologists or software engineering teams. Interestingly, I did learn a few years ago doing these sort of assessments with organizations that there are other departments in organizations that also refer to the rest of the organization as the business. So HR is a classic one, in finance as well. They often refer to the rest of the organization as the business, which is, it's so weird because it kind of suggests that people don't think that they're also part of that organization. But what we're seeing here is a symptom of the problem that we have, which is caused by an opportunity. So the opportunity that we have is digitalization. So we now live in a digital economy, and many organizations have proven how profitable and successful they can be using the new cloud and internet technologies that we've had available for a few decades, in some respects now. And other companies are not doing so well. So we have this huge opportunity. And over the last few decades, for some organizations, that has meant that they have increased their technological capabilities. So I've worked with companies like banks in the UK that are 250 years old. So they only had technology teams emerge about 40 years ago, and they look very different from organizations that maybe got technology teams sort of 20, 30 years ago. I started my career in the technology industry around 30 years ago. Email was quite a new thing at the time. The internet was a very new thing at the time. And then we saw the dot-com boom. So things have changed quite a lot. But what we still are struggling with in many organizations is this separation between the relatively new technology teams and the rest of the organization. And this is something that Value Stream Management is really, really clever at resolving, because what it's doing is it kind of takes that traditional organizational view away. And what it says is that we care about the value stream, and the value stream starts with an idea and it finishes when that idea is in the customer's hands. And in many respects, we don't care about who is in the middle of those two things. So it should connect our product ownership, product management, part of the business, and also our technology side of the business, because we're all in the business, we're all part of the organization. So actually, if you start connecting your value streams, it is a really effective way of solving that problem in terms of connecting those parts and helping people understand that they're all part of the same steps that are serving the customer. We do have another question, which is, with value stream management or value streams ever increasing impact on the way we organize ourselves, how can one make this part of the ecosystem and not an optional activity? Whenever I bring up this point, it's turned down with a statement that it's time consuming and something that is not a must. I've of a different opinion. So I think, Prashanth, when you're saying VSM here, I think what you're actually saying is value stream map. This is one of the things that's quite confusing for us at the moment, is that when we say VSM, some people will hear value stream map or value stream mapping. Some people will hear value stream management. For me, when I say VSM, I mean management. I'm going to explain with a slide coming up in a little while why I make that difference. But I totally agree with you, Prashant, that value stream mapping can be a very resource intensive exercise. When I first started doing value stream management, the very first one I did was actually a 4-day exercise. It was split into 2 sets of 2 days, and it had most of the highest paid people in the particular organization I was working with in the room. So it was very intensive. My own personal path to here has involved also having 10 years as a DevOps consultant and coach, working with banks and telecoms and government and organizations across the whole of Europe and the Middle East. And one of the things that I discovered, having engaged with these organizations and very long-term coaching initiatives where value stream mapping was part of the toolkit we were using to implement DevOps, I discovered that value stream mapping was great in some respects. So it was great at light bulb moments. It was great at creating bonding within teams. It was incredible for documenting what the current state looked at. Where it was weak was being able to really implement the action plan that we would develop as part of the initial mapping around the current and then the future state. So one of the things that really attracted me to value stream management was that it instills these ways of thinking and ways of working into our daily life in an organization. And we'll come back to this again in a minute, it builds on what we've been doing with DevOps. Remember, I talked about that renaissance. So it effectively allows us to automate the value stream map, which means that we can continually inspect and adapt it, which means that barrier to entry that we had around being able to really go back and see what we were doing and check on our progress is gone, because that data is available to us and we don't need to get into a room for 2 days, 4 days to have a look at that data. It's available all the time. I can see a hand up from Yvette. I don't see a question in the chat, or I don't see a question in the Q&A.
I'm going to allow the person to speak, Yvette.
Okay, great.
So she can ask the question. Okay.
Hi,
Oh,
Yvette.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had my hand up. I apologize.
No worries. Nice to meet you anyway.
You
Welcome.
too. Thank you for this information.
Do let us know if you have a question. Right, so I'm going to get on because time is ticking on. Right, so these are the indicators that we have in the research from last year in October that VSM adoption is in fact advancing. So you really need 3 years worth of data to be able to see this. Obviously, you can't see a trend in 1 year's worth of data. In year 2, you might think you can start seeing something, but you can't really be sure until you've got that 3rd year coming in. We've got advancements across the VSM implementation roadmap. I'm going to show you that in a minute. It's going to be really important for what we're doing today because actually the whole assessment is built around the implementation roadmap steps as well. And it's going to help me explain a little bit more about what I meant a minute ago about this difference between value stream mapping and value stream management. We're also seeing people increasingly create value hypotheses. Now, this sounds like something you would do anyway. It sounds like it makes business sense, but actually a lot of people do projects and have product backlogs, and they don't often think or always think about what they're doing from a customer value perspective. They don't actually imagine or document what the outcome will be in terms of customer usage or customer sentiment once they deliver that. We're seeing people more often organising around value streams. So back to that question we had about connecting business and technology. This is what's really helping is people realising that a value stream, it just supersedes all it's more important than the traditional organisational chart. Once you start seeing value streams in your organisation and you start organising around them, those kind of barriers and silos really just they disappear. And similarly, more people are reporting that they're aligning to value streams. So more people are understanding that they exist in a value stream. For those of you that might be wondering what is a value stream, I just stop for a moment and go there. A value stream is basically anything that has a customer. And it starts with an idea, it finishes with the customer, and there's a number of steps in between it. So every business is made of value streams. You just need to figure out where they are. That means that every person that works within a business, and remember the business also includes technologists, is also part of a value stream. So when people understand how they align to them, this is when they can start working with them. Excitingly, people are measuring value more frequently. We might not have huge amounts of time to go into this today, but value is very hard to define. I often say that value is in the eye of the beholder, and it does vary from organisation to organisation. What's interesting about the digital world, though, is that we have a lot of indicators for value that are common in digital platforms across different types of organizations. So it becomes very interesting when we're looking at digital platforms and what they can tell us about customer experience in particular. I mentioned this a couple of times already. I'm going to mention it again. In this digital world, we have DevOps tool chains. That's a really big thing that we've created over the last 15 years. Those DevOps tool chains are basically value streams. They digitize the digital value stream. So when you've got a digital product or service and you're collecting that data, we have that ability to automate the map of that value stream using that data. And we have a whole load of people coming to the market with value stream management platforms that help us do exactly that help us connect all of these pieces of our DevOps tool chains and extract the data and help us make actionable insights, because data, of course, is nothing without an insight. So I'm just going to stop there because I can see lots of activity here as well. So in all sessions I attend, there is no talk about how to decrease complexity. For example, the bigger, longer or larger an end-to-end flow is, the more complexity usually. Is this challenge handled within VSM? It's a big challenge, isn't it? And the challenge of complexity in this context is to do with dependencies normally. And what we try and do in DevOps actually is we try and reduce dependencies. In fact, it's quite a famous saying in DevOps, which is don't manage dependencies, break them. Which, while it is a philosophy that should be admired, is often difficult to implement, certainly at any speed, because dependencies take quite a long time to find ways to get through them. But how does value stream management help with complexity? Well, what it does is it identifies these value streams, and what you can do is you map your value stream, map where the dependencies are, use the theory of constraints to work out where the waste is, and then try and focus on the bits where you can deal with it. And if it is a dependency that's causing the constraint, you try and tackle that dependency. Or if it's an impossible dependencies, and sometimes we do come across ones that do seem utterly impossible to resolve, then you look somewhere else in the value stream for that improvement that you want to see. So here's an example of some of that data. So time to value could also be flow if you're using flow metrics. Of course, many of you might say time to market. I personally don't really like time to market because you could be putting stuff out in the market that isn't useful. Whereas if we say time to value, what we're doing is making ourselves acknowledge that it has been of use to our customers, it has been valuable. The other side of what we discovered in the latest report, which again, you can find on the VSMC site, I did see Patrice put a link to the site in the chat earlier. The other side of this, apart from the fact that people are adopting VSM, is that we are increasingly correlating these value stream management practices with organizational performance. In short, people that do VSM are higher performing organizations. You do better, you're more profitable, your customers are happier. So how do we know this? Well, these are the kind of practices that we're seeing in higher performing organizations. They are more likely to organize around value streams. They're more likely to be working digital products in the digital economy and more likely to be accessing one of those value stream management platforms to get visibility into their value streams. They're more likely to be creating those value hypotheses. So they're thinking about what the value outcome is of their work with their customers. They're documenting it. They're going back and having a look at it. And they're thinking about that across the full scale of work items. And when I say the full scale of work items, what I mean is from portfolio all the way down to PBI or product backlog items. So if you're being granular and cascading your work down, those hypotheses are cascaded the whole way down as well, providing clarity and visibility in from strategy to execution. Those higher performing organizations are also defining those value hypotheses earlier in the product lifecycle. So in that portfolio level, they're putting the customer first when they think about value. So instead of using metrics which are quite lagging, like profit and revenue, that tell us like something happened in the past and it was quite good or bad and has had an outcome later down the line, they are actually thinking about those leading indicators, like how much customers are using it, what they're getting as sentiment analysis, maybe even reviews and referrals. And in the reports, you'll see that we talk about reviews and referrals potentially being both leading and lagging indicators, but they are using more of the digital indicators around things like customer journey time, basket size, form conversions, all of those kind of things. It won't surprise you, I don't think, that the high-performing organizations also have faster flow. This is something that those of us in the DevOps world have known for a long time already, but something that we haven't been maybe quite as good as in the DevOps world is the measurement of value realization. So we did that work and it had this impact, and we know it did because we've got the quantified data in our tools. And then finally, this big one that we sort of introduced last year that we're getting into some more, that these higher performers understand and see their organization as value stream network. So they understand that their organization is made up of multiple value streams and that those value streams often interconnect. Those interconnection points are obviously where we often see dependencies, which often present those delays, can be very problematic and can often present risks as well. So value stream management, therefore, by its very nature, is a dependency management system. So here's an example of some of the data we're seeing here. So what you're seeing here is about whether people are reporting that they are aligning to specifically identified and explicitly named value streams. And what you're seeing here is what you're seeing is the higher performers are more likely to be aligning, in particular the high performers. We see a little bit of a dip on elite performers across the whole thing, which is interesting. We think it's to do with them being born on the web. Now, a quick break while I have a look at the Q&A, because I can see we've got a question there. So how do you recommend avoiding the Dunning-Kruger effect? So people not starting the work because they think they are already good and only relabeling initiatives. So, wow, that's a human psychology one, isn't it? When they think they're already good enough. I think if people think they're already good enough, then they haven't got a pain point, they haven't got a challenge that they're trying to address. So when we come to the assessment shortly, we'll see that the first part of the assessment is all about where you're starting from. So if people think they're great and there's no room for improvement, then I think that's going to be hard to avoid. But the whole point about value stream management is to show via data what can be done. So if your competitors are out competing you, or if you've got customers complaining, or you think you're not making enough money, those are all good reasons perhaps to see if there is a way to improve your ways of working. The relabeling initiatives is a different problem. Again, it's like only the masters, I think, of the art can really understand the dangers of relabeling. For some reason, this keeps on coming up at the moment in my life, this conversation, because I keep on telling the story about one Friday I was with actually a UK-owned and headquartered company, but I was in their office in Krakow. And it was a Friday afternoon and all hell kind of broke loose because they announced they weren't having any more business analysts, and that all the business analysts were going. But in fact, what they'd actually done is they'd relabeled all of their business analysts product owners because that was going to solve all the problems that they were having with Agile. But they didn't retrain any of the business analysts what it meant to be a product owner. They didn't empower any of these people to have what you need as a product owner in terms of the decision-making capabilities to prioritize and refine and decide on the work that you're going to be doing and collaborating with the team on it. So relabeling is a real danger. I think it is only something that master practitioners and leaders can really deal with. So, Fortune, as more organisations become interested in Marty Kagan style product operating principles, how do you see these aligning or diverging from VSM? Interesting, Marty Kagan keeps on coming up nearly every day at the moment as well. And certainly all of these kind of product-oriented, product ops ideas. For me, I gave you one definition of a value stream earlier. I said it's anything that's got a customer. It could also be, sometimes I define it as anything that delivers a product or a service. So I can't disconnect value streams from products. For me, they're the same thing, but sometimes the product looks more like a service or more like a platform, depending on what the organization's market is that they're in. So, for example, if your product is cloud, you might think of that more as a platform. If your product is providing coaching, you might think of that more as a service, but it's all product oriented as far as I'm concerned. Interestingly, though, in this beyond projects discussion, I would say that 90% of the value stream mapping exercises that I've ever been involved with were with projects that were going towards products. And actually part of what we were doing, as well as kind of a DevOps exercise, like a DevOps planning exercise, was actually assisting with that waterfall to agile project to product transition, and learning how to regularly enhance a project, what had once been a project, kind of thinking that now as a long-lived product that will now be enhanced. So Prashanth wants me to get back to the slide in hand, which I will do now. So how do I read this chart? So this chart here is about the VSM implementation roadmap. So let me just skip one ahead. So this is the implementation roadmap. We introduced it in the 2021 report, and we've updated it in the last two reports. And the step that we added, we made it look a bit more current with some new logos, and also added this assess step last year. Sorry, I can't get back now. There we go. So what you're seeing at the bottom is all those different steps. So those are the steps that we suggest people follow when they are implementing VSM. So what we are looking at in the research here is we're trying to understand how much people have adopted VSM in the context of the implementation roadmap. So by asking which steps they've completed, we get this visual. So what you're seeing is the orange bar is 2022 and the green bar is last year, 2023. It's a multiple answer question. So what you're seeing is that, understandably, and as you would expect, more people have completed the earlier steps in the roadmap. So it kind of drops as we go along the roadmap. There are a couple of things to observe. One is there is a spike here around mapping. So again, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I'll just say for now that value stream mapping is better known than value stream management. It probably has a bit of a longer history, and it is many people's entry point into value stream management. So unsurprisingly that we see a little kind of up blip here. You're also seeing a bit of a blip here, and this is to do with people's realization. So the connect step is the same as the adoption of the VSMP effectively. When you connect your DevOps toolchain to your value stream, when you make that connection, you can buy a VSMP, a value stream management platform, or you can hand crank some of it yourself, and lots of people do. But you kind of miss out on all of the development expertise that's been put in by the vendors here, and you miss out on the automated actionable insights and all sorts of other things that you get when you go for a full value stream management platform. But the point is these two steps kind of merge. You're seeing a big leap up here as people realize that data exists and they can get to it. And then importantly as well, you're seeing a drop in people that have done none of these steps. So what we're saying here is we are seeing a gradual increase in people adopting value stream management, as shown by the increase in the people doing these steps across the board. One day we hope to see this completely flat, and that will show us that VSM is basically mainstream adopted by everybody because everybody's done all of the steps. But at the moment that's not the case, but we're seeing it improving as more people are getting on the roadmap. So, do different cultures, sorry, just going back to questions for a minute while we're here, from Craig, do different cultures approach VSM differently? We're thinking there are possible differences based on power dynamics between teams in Western Europe and Eastern Asia. Yes, but just because people in different cultures do different things differently. I'm thinking actually about a value stream mapping exercise I did in Saudi Arabia. We were mapping quite an unusual one actually, the API team, so a team that were responsible for building APIs across the rest of the business. What was really distracting about the culture in this particular organization that we were told is very common to that particular country is that people, because it was a day-long, or actually a 2-day-long exercise, people would drop in and out, which made it really hard to visually collaborate on a value stream. If any of you have done value stream mapping, you can imagine how hard that is, having different experts with different views on the value stream coming in and out and trying to create one single agreed view of a value stream during that time. But yes, different cultures do things differently, and VSM is no different. Then we've got a next question. When you begin with mapping, do you recommend completing the flow first at a high level and then as needed, expanding each element or node and focusing in detail as needed? So yes, that is absolutely how I do it. And Karen Martin recommends it. I'm sure Steve would probably say the same. I think he's in the audience, maybe he can pop something in chat. But yes, I would start with the high level flow and then build the detail into it. Start thinking about how long each step is involved, how many people are involved, what the different touch times and wait times and idle times are, and then start analysing it, look at where the value add activities are, and then put that to one side and redo it and come up with your future state map. Because for me, there's very little point doing the exercise without having a future state map. It's very interesting knowing where you are and you get some insights that way, but the real power of this is about improvement and looking forward. So that's that one done, and that is Prashanth. So what was happening there is people had not started those steps. So if we just go back a sec, what we're seeing here is more people have done this, a proportion more people have done that step than they have these other steps. So it's not that they've dropped them, it's that they have not got to that step yet. So if you look at the roadmap here, what we're saying is, right, you want to do VSM, this is how we recommend you do it. You start wherever you are. We recommend that you start by having a baseline created of where you actually are today. So this is what we're going to talk about in a minute, the assessment. When you understand where you are, think about where you want to go at a high level. So your North Star, set your vision. The next step is to identify your value streams. Now, we did do a workshop last year. Members can get to the materials via our members portal. There is a course in the members portal called the VSM Implementation Roadmap Workshop Series. Bit of a long title, I know. We will be building that course out more this year, but we did do one workshop last year to get it started off, which was about identifying value streams. And one of the big conversations we had was whether you should try and identify all of the value streams in your organization, or whether you should kind of start with one or two. Now, this isn't an unusual conversation for anybody that's been involved in a change program in the last few decades. If you do Agile or you do DevOps, you have the same thing, that you normally want to start by experimenting with a couple of pilot teams. So this helps with value streams as well, is to try and understand two or three, more than one, because if you just do one, you haven't got anything to compare it to, but two or three, and trying to figure out where you're going with that. So that was Prashant's question. And then the next step would be around organizing. So this is about finding the people. So that first question, I think it was about connecting the rest of the organization to technology. And it's worth remembering that we're probably talking about connecting product management essentially with software engineering. So in product management, we're talking about connecting the people that have got the direct feedback from the customers, the people that are coming up with the ideas, and making sure that we're not forgetting what we've called, Donald Wright and Henderson called the fuzzy front end, but we're actually connecting those people to the people that are receiving that sprint backlog and starting the development work. So we need to get that picture for all of the people that are involved with all of the steps in our value stream. And then I start talking about mapping, and only then. So as I've said a few times, for me, mapping is a subtopic of management. It is one that a lot of people have used to kind of get started with value stream management. So it is that entry point for a lot of people. But this is where we start bringing the players together in a virtual or a physical space, and doing that visual collaboration to understand what that value stream actually looks like. This is a very powerful piece of work. Once we've done that, and you could do these steps the other way around, I was quite pleased the very first report that we delivered, because I ummed and ahed about this value stream management implementation roadmap, about which order to put these 2 points in, and decided that people like to do people, process, tools. So I kind of left it as people and process and tools. But you could do connect before, and some people do, because what we're doing here is making that connection between the data that we've got in our DevOps delivery pipeline or in other digital pipelines in the organization, and we're connecting them to the value stream. So actually going, okay, these are the steps in our value stream, and this is the data we're getting. And that's what allows you to continually inspect and adapt, rather than having to get back in a room to do that mapping. So why do that assessment step? Well, the first reason you want to do it is because you want to baseline your current state. You want to understand exactly where you are. And if you're a coach or if you're a leader, this is going to be the thing that is going to be that's going to allow you to measure where you go on the journey. So as an assessment consultant, what I would do into an organization is I would go to all the different value streams, all the different teams in an organization, and I would baseline where they're at today. And then I would go back in 6 or 12 months, because in that part of the process is to say, this is where you're at and these are your weaknesses. This is where you could improve. Here's some recommendations. And then you go back 6 months or a year later and go, how's it going now? Let's have a look. Let's revisit those questions and take another snapshot of where you are and see what's changed and see where your improvement areas are now. And that can go on for several years, because this is ultimately at the core of VSM. It is a change improvement program. It's no different from Agile and DevOps and things like that in that respect. What we're trying to do is get better outcomes for the organization as a whole, better business outcomes for the organization as a whole. Other things that we can do as part of an assessment is we can give you some comparisons about how your team or your organization compares within your organization and in the industry. Now, I would advise you to be careful with both of these things. Comparing capabilities in an organization, and actually for any of you that are DevOpsy like me, one of your Bibles is probably the book Accelerate, and there's a great chapter, I think it's around page 17 or 19, it's a great few pages, sorry, about maturity versus capability and the dangers of comparing team capability to another team capability. And Agile coaches, you'll be familiar with this, because it's a similar argument about like not comparing story points with one team to another, in that people have their own ways of comparing story points and teams have their own profiles and their own pressures. So it's kind of useful, but mostly in the respect to say, this team has a really strong culture, or this team has extremely fast flow, and going, why is that? What have they done that's different? What is successful, and how can we share that success? How can we surface that success? And then, in the words of Jean Kim, how can we make that local discovery a global improvement? So be a bit careful comparing team to team, but it is great for leaders to get a heat map across the whole organisation about where teams are at and where they might need to invest, or be patient, or kind of investigate a little bit more about why that team is just so good at what they do. And then the other warning is to be a little bit careful about comparing your organisation to other organisations in your same industry. So one side of the coin is, if you're doing or perceived to be doing really well, you could get really complacent about it. And if you're not perceived to do so well, you could actually demoralize people quite a lot, so demotivate people. In my experience, people often really want this. They're like, we want to know how good we are against the rest of the industry. And they normally want that to try and report back to their leadership on how they're doing. So it's our classic kind of Taylorist, top-down, hierarchical, traditional organizational culture that likes this sort of stuff. In more modern, more transformational leadership, more servant leader type environments, what we want to do is we want to empower each team to participate and self-discover their own improvements. So this is not that helpful. As I say, it doesn't give people enough context to be helpful. All it does is potentially make people a bit complacent or demotivated or demoralized. So be really careful about that, but you can get that sort of data from us as well. But the most important thing is about this improvement. So we need to discover where those gaps are, and we need to surface and share that success, and then measure that ongoing journey. This is why we do it. So Gunnar's asked another question, which is, Jeff Patton's dual track development has a discovery and a delivery flow. Both need to be done in parallel by the same people to be effective. How much is this in line with VSM? You have two fully fledged flows in parallel. So I believe this is probably quite similar to what we cover in the course about some of the differences between manufacturing and digital value streams. So this kind of idea of design and development and then delivery. So the discovery and the delivery flow, I think, are the similar concepts, that you can be doing one thing and then there's another thing. So there's kind of like the fuzzy front end, and then there's the actual kind of delivery workflow that goes on. So there's a lot of, unsurprisingly, Gunnar, a lot of similarities. I think this is probably kind of like going, I'm just looking at the clock and thinking we don't have enough time, but I'm just going to mention a couple of things that you could do to help with this. One is, remember, everything is interconnected. This is a way of working. It overlaps with other ways of working. And as coaches, consultants, our job is to understand these different ways and find ways to experiment with our clients and within our organizations and see what works, and yet use it logically as a kind of educated guess that this might make a difference. So trying to identify the problem. It's particularly helpful if you know people that have done it before, if you haven't done it before. But we are definitely talking about flows. If it is going to be useful for the teams to do these flows in parallel and you've got enough information to do both, because I'm kind of, it's like you've got a challenge. Can you do the delivery flow if you haven't done the discovery? It's like, is it putting the cart before the horse? But if that works for some people, then certainly go for it. So, right. Let's get to the assessment then. So you can, of course, we're here today, VSMC and comparative agility together. Comparative agility have really helped us out because we developed the assessment within our consulting huddle at the VSMC. So just to remind you, the Value Stream Management Consortium is a not-for-profit trade association or professional membership association whose job is to create a space for expert practitioners and interested parties to come together and learn and collaborate. So Steve and I worked with our consulting huddle, which is a group of our members who are mainly consultants or practitioners in organisations, to develop the assessment itself. And then we needed a place for it to be accessible and usable by people to use either in the consulting environment, so with their clients, or within their own organisation. So comparative agility as an assessment platform with lots and lots of experience and lots of assessments was very helpful in giving us this opportunity to use their assessment platform, make this available in a very easy way for people. So once you log into comparative agility, you'll get something that looks a bit like this, and you'll need to create a team. And then once you've got the team, you can add the capabilities. So you should have a list of different capabilities, and you'll be looking for the VSM capability there to add to it. And then you get the survey. So then what you'll do, depending on who you are, you'll either receive the survey and you'll be asked a number of questions, or you'll send the survey out to people to answer. So let's just dive into the survey a little bit here and have a look, because we do have the time. So hopefully, I do need to log back in again, which is fine. So let me just see the Q&A. Okay, Karen's actually wanting to go back a little bit, so to more people aligning to value streams. So please provide an example, what triggers this happening and what does this look like? So this is more people answering the question. Let me go back to the slide, actually, that might help. So this is not that question, is it this question? Yeah, so this is the question. Are you aligned to a specifically identified and explicitly named value stream? And then we gave people 3 answers: simple yes, or a no, I work for a shared service team or other cross-value stream teams. So it's kind of like, if you're familiar with team topologies and things like that, you'll know that there are slightly different team types. And then we've got the absolute no, we don't organise around value streams. So the other part of that question, please provide an example. That's really the example. It's like whether somebody knows that they're part of a value stream. So it's phrased quite specifically, this question. It says specifically identified and explicitly named. So what we're looking for here is that the organisation is talking, the people in the organisation are thinking and talking about value streams. They're saying, right, we know we've got a value stream here. It's our mobile value stream, or maybe it's our API value stream, or maybe it's our horse racing value stream if they're a gambling or a trading company, for example. So the example really is, I know that I'm part of a value stream because we've called it a name. We've said we talk about this value stream. So Karen, I hope that explains the answer for you. Perhaps if you need a bit more, you could let me know. But the trigger that makes that happen is people realizing that if they organize around value streams, they'll be able to manage flow, and they will be able to make those value streams more efficient, and they will be able to understand the customer experience better and all of that. So you said that, you've got that. So that is great. I will move on. So what you're seeing here is what I just showed you on screenshots, basically. So you're seeing you can set up the different teams, or if you're a consultant, different companies, and then you would set up the surveys, and then you allow people to go to the survey. So because I was logged out, it took me back to that screen. That's fine, because we can go to the survey this way. And I'm just going to walk you through a few of the questions so you get a sense for really how we've set it up and what you're going to end up with at the end of it when you take it. So you'll remember that we just talked about the implementation roadmap and the steps on it. So we start from wherever we are, we assess, we set the vision, we identify the value streams, we organise around the value streams, we map them, we connect them, we inspect and adapt them. So what you'll notice here is that the survey or the assessment follows these steps as well. It skips the assess step because we're in the assess step, but we do start with the starting point. So as a practitioner, either as a change agent in an organisation or as a consultant coach that's been brought in to help the organisation, what we're doing initially is trying to understand sort of where we're at, what does the ground look like. So the first question is, or the first statement, and I should probably explain as well, being a devotee of Accelerate, I'm a devotee of Likert scales. So this is a Likert scale where the respondent is given a statement and there is a scale of how much they agree or disagree with the statement. They can also be quite neutral, or they can also say this isn't applicable, which is kind of the same as a don't know. That works. So the first question is, we currently have methods to highlight delivery performance issues. So we're not being specific. Remember, everything's interconnected. So they could be using Agile, they could even be using project management, but we're just asking them really if they know how that they can actually find if something isn't actually really working. The next question is, we've implemented principles and practices like Lean or Kanban to improve performance. So we're now going down the route of, okay, so how Lean conversant are they? So they would answer that one. And then the next one is like, our critical delivery capabilities have an identified individual lead and backup. So what we're trying to understand here is, again, what that team profile looks like. So whether there is an individual that has ownership of the delivery in that particular team and how that backs up. And then we're going to start talking about autonomy and dependencies. So we've touched on dependencies already today because we had a very specific question that led us there. But dependencies are obviously a huge part of what happens in Agile and in DevOps, and therefore in VSM at the moment as well. So very few people would be able to answer that they have full team autonomy with minimal dependencies. And we've got little help buttons here as well. So if you see a little yellow help, it will pop up something that will help people understand a little bit more. What I say to people as well, though, is that if somebody's doing this survey, and if you're asking your teams or your organization to do an assessment like this, you should have this conversation with them as part. You should brief them, basically. I learned this quite early on in my assessment career. I was with Lego, and it was actually feedback from them. And what they said was that, and at the time we were doing like a combo assessment, because you can do it in person or you can just email this out. And actually I found that a combination of those two methods is most effective. So the in-person sort of reads like a number of interviews, but interviews is a bit of an intimidating word. So you might want to say like chats, and I would typically book sort of half hour to 45-minute chats back to back over a couple of days and try and talk to sort of 10 people, over the 2 days. Now, in some of the organisations I was working with where they have 8,000 people working in the technical teams, clearly, even if I got quite a big team of people like me together, we weren't going to get through a very big fraction of that organisation. So when we have a fully electronic way of assessing people like we have here, you can effectively break that constraint. So you give everybody in an organisation the opportunity to participate in a change. And any of you that are change experts will know how important that is. If people don't feel like they're part of a change, they won't want to get involved and the change won't happen. So something like this is a great way to give everybody an opportunity to say their piece and get involved. and combining it with that in person. And you can still use this, by the way, you can still collect data using this, but what happens is using these questions creates the opportunity to collect narrative around it. So you'll actually have conversations with people about, why their teams aren't autonomous, what their dependencies look like, what their approach to dependency management looks like. That's why you need kind of 45 minutes. So yes, the briefing, when people knew that they were going to be assessed, they were fearful. Again, any of you that are change agents or experienced change managers will know that people are generally fearful about change. We are wired to be fearful about change in an evolutionary perspective, because change can be quite risky. So when we are trying to help teams become better, we need to make them feel that we're not going to be just pointing fingers at what they're doing badly, and they're not going to be punished for things that they're not yet successful at or they want to do better. So one of the ways that you can help with that when you're implementing an assessment like this is actually briefing the teams and explaining that, and explaining that it's actually what you're doing is supporting them on their journey of self-discovery. And you're not coming in to point fingers, or it's not a carrot and stick exercise. What you're trying to do is provide them with the information that they need to figure out how they can do things better. So that was about autonomy and dependencies, and then we go on to talk about metrics. And throughput and work in progress and delivery, and then tools, but starting to get a view about whether they have connected the fact that they have tools that can tell them about the work that they have in their value streams. This question tells us quite a lot about those three concepts. And then this one is about whether they've realised that they need to do it. So I think this is coming back to the resistance question earlier on. So people need to figure out what that pain is. So on the little pop-up here, we're seeing like common pains include overwork, unpredictability, delays, friction, and conflict with other teams. So you can all take the time to go through this at your leisure, and I'll talk about how you get it to your teams in a minute. But you'll see that after we've done the starting point, we move on to the vision, and then on to leadership, and then back into the assessment, the implementation roadmap steps. So we look at identifying the value streams, organising around them, mapping them, making those connections, and then inspecting and adapting, and then talk about the next steps. So that is the assessment in a nutshell. You can just go up and go onto onto comparative agility right now and get set up. We have had a very nice offer from Comparative Agility, so thank you very much, team there, that we can now offer our members the assessment access for 5 teams for free. You did have 1, now you can have 5, so that will give you a massive opportunity to compare, contrast, have conversations with each other about what's really good, really identify the things that you're strong at. Remember, people might be fearful. We are wired to resist change. So use this with a very positive spin on it about surfacing success and celebrating that success. So if you're a member, you can email me and I will set you up with your 5 free teams with the help of Comparative Agility. And if you're not a member, I would highly recommend, obviously, that you become a member. We have different levels of membership. The entry level is annual individual membership, and here is a code for $50 off that, and the link for you there. I've just got one more question from Karen, actually, if you wouldn't mind, if I've just got a minute to go there before we wrap up completely. So the question is, what is the source for metrics, most specifically metrics to assess organizational change management improvement? So metrics is a really big question, Karen. So metrics actually is another part of why I got really into VSM. So I used to do a lot of metrics workshops with the teams that I was working with, and it's really hard. So that's the same reason, I guess, that value is quite hard to define for different organizations. The metrics were quite hard to choose. So there are lots of different sources of metrics when it comes to value stream management and lean, and some of them are lean metrics. There's flow metrics, there's DORA metrics, there's all sorts of different metrics. Organisational change management is a vast subject, as I'm sure you're aware. What the assessment does here is collect data on those different dimensions that we just covered in brief, and gives you a picture according to the performance on those metrics. Very happy, Karen, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever that we can continue that conversation. But I think it's time to wrap up.